All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the 5th episode of The Founder's Mentality. I am so excited about this one. And if you've been following the progression of the guests coming on the show, you should be as well. I've had Thompson mentioned on the website now for the last month and a half. When I decided I wanted to do this podcast, this was one of the first guys I reached out to. I didn't want to do the podcast unless he agreed to do it. And he agreed to do it. So I was like, fine, I'm doing it. It's true. So anyway, this is somebody that, especially in Minnesota, if you don't know him, you should know him, especially if you're in the healthcare space. But in the startup community, this is a rock star startup guy over here. Thompson, can you do a quick intro about who you are and what you're currently working on right now?
Yeah, sure. So I'll start with what I'm working on. So Nice.Healthcare is the name of the company, and Nice.Healthcare is a technology-enabled primary care clinic that brings all the care to you in the comfort of your home via our app. You can get care via chat, video, or in-home visits on the same day, and we deliver a wide variety of prescription drugs at no additional charge.
Yep. Awesome. All right. So I recently had a guest on the podcast, Parker Schlenk. One of the things we discussed was establishing domain knowledge and just a domain authority in your space that you're in. This is not your first startup. You've had a handful of businesses, but the common thread has always been healthcare. And so where did you develop that knowledge in the healthcare space that allowed you to say, okay, now's time for me to strike out and do my own thing? Where did that really come from?
Wow. So, it came from a series of experiences and jobs. And the first one was at a home care agency, which was a company founded by my parents. Oh. And I worked in the finance department.
Okay.
So I was, this was like late 90s.
Yeah.
Early 2000s, and, doing stuff on typewriters and computers are starting to get a little bit more traction in the home care industry. And so I learned a lot about healthcare financing.
Okay.
About healthcare coding, a lot of the regulation, public programs, Medicare, Medicaid. Right. And then I just finished my first graduate degree, and I wanted to use that degree, and it wasn't in finance, it was in statistics. Okay. So I went and got a job at what is now Optum. Yep. Optum Health. Yep. And I was there for 11 months because that's a longer story of why I was there for 11 months, but I left. Abruptly, of my own volition after 11 months, but I learned more about healthcare there too. Yeah. Working for Giant United, huge databases, just a wide spectrum of things. Yep. Then I went to Medica, worked as a healthcare economist, got promoted a bunch of times, ended up leading a big team in IT, doing analytics. So I got exposed to all areas of the company, across the healthcare spectrum. And then I went back to business school, and that's when I started working on startups.
Yeah. Okay. And that's where you found that passion for startups.
Yeah.
What was it like making that jump? Because that's another thing that Parker and I were talking about. His background was absolutely in corporate America. He had a lot of experience there. He had a great job, great paying job, and decided to make that move. I've known you for a while now, so I kind of know at your core, you're an entrepreneur. You need to work for yourself. And I'm sure that that's kind of what the impetus was for making this jump. But what was that transition like for you?
So, for me, it was a little bit eased by the fact that I was already in business school full time. I didn't go part time. I went to business school full time at the Carlson School of Management. Okay. My wife and I, we didn't have any kids at the time either. Sure. So we just set up our life in a way to have me be back in school full time.
Sure. Okay.
And so that was the first step. But when you're in business school, the whole thing is geared around getting a corporate job.
Yes.
That pays you as much as possible, doing something that you can at least stand, ideally something that you love. Right. Doesn't always happen. Yep. And so that's the goal. So for me, I was a very unorthodox student because, 50% of the program didn't apply to me because I wasn't trying to get a job, and so, like everybody does an internship. During the summer of your first year, which usually leads to your job after your second year. Right. Whereas I didn't do that. Right. I was working on my company. Yep. And so I would say it was a more natural step, but I would say one of the key things was keeping our personal burn rate low.
Okay.
Our first son was born while we were in business school, and just continuing to have that mentality of scrappiness of the household, allowed me to continue down this entrepreneurial journey because it took many tries, to get something that actually stuck.
Yeah. So you've already let the cat out of the bag on a couple of the things I was going to ask you about, but I want to dive into them just briefly here. So you mentioned working for your father. I did notice that your father owns his own company, or did at one point. Does he still own?
Still. Yep.
Okay, awesome. Also, the way I was connected to you was through your wife. Running into your wife at a networking event, it was just happenstance. We were just having a friendly conversation, and she said, "You should meet my Thompson." I'll never forget how she said that. My Thompson. I love that. But regardless, I said, well, I've been trying to meet with Thompson for a long time. I had been sending you messages. I had been ransacking you at events that you've been speaking at. For whatever reason, you're like one of the few people that I had a really hard time getting in front of. And finally, it was your wife who gave me a little bit of knowledge of how to have a meeting with you, which I'm going to give away right now. If you want to have a meeting with Thompson, the trick is to invite him for a water. That's the trick. So we met at a coffee shop where you had water. But so your wife is a founder.
Yep.
Your family, you come from a family of founders.
Yep.
So, I mean, this is just ingrained in you. But now you have children in the equation. Your wife is still a business owner. How are you balancing that in your family?
Yeah, and part of it's related to why it was so difficult to get in touch with me or to meet me.
Sure.
Because I'm ruthless with my time.
Yeah.
And I'm an anti-founder in a way. Like I don't go to networking events. I don't like going to things. I do speaking, but it's usually I'm invited.
Right.
To do that.
Yep.
But I turn down a lot of events, to speak at because I really value time with my family, with my wife in particular, and now our 2 sons.
Yeah.
And I don't like things getting in the way of that.
Yeah.
So when it comes to balancing time, when we started I would say the previous companies I was working on, my wife was not working outside the home.
Okay.
And she was doing consulting, so she could manage her own time and she could do it, when she wanted. So it was a lot easier to do things before we had kids. But once the kids came in the picture, I went, oh my goodness, like everything changed, as people know.
Yeah.
And when you have children, and I can't even imagine having a regular job and having kids. To me, it seems like it'd be so easy.
Yeah.
Like just so easy, because with a startup at a company, like you're never off.
No, never.
Until you have a liquidity event maybe, and you're sitting on the beach. But until then, it's always on.
Right.
So, but kids, some night they might not sleep. You might have a presentation the next day.
Yep.
Now my wife and I both have businesses. So she has customers and clients and partners and vendors, and I have them. So we have to work things out. We're a single car family. We've always been a single car family in our 15 years of marriage. So we're coordinating the vehicle, and I would say the biggest thing is being very protective and jealous of our time.
Yeah.
And that's how we do it. And again, I don't have hobbies.
Yep.
I don't hang out with friends. I don't go out.
Yep.
We don't watch that much TV.
Sure.
Every once in a while there's a Netflix program that catches our eye.
Yeah.
And besides that, we're both working on our companies.
Yeah.
Taking care of the children.
Yep.
Taking care of the household.
I think that's very important. That's a bit of advice that I actually received from one of the other guests that I've had on the podcast, Muhammad, who we were having a conversation in the office once, off camera, off microphone. And he said, this is going to sound really rude, Josh, but at a certain point, there are going to be meetings that you're just not going to take any longer, right? I have always been very free with my time. I have always been very willing to sit down with anybody that wants to sit down with me. That has all changed in the last couple months, because I literally don't have the time to meet with all the people and run the business the way I need to run it right now. And so though it feels challenging for me, because I'm used to just being very free with my time and very open with people, I have had to take a step back. I have had to become that person that when someone reaches out to meet with me, I give them a calendar link and say, hey, can you schedule this for 2 or 3 months out? Because if you schedule this in the next 2 months, this is going to be really bad for me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
You do need to make those decisions. You do need to make those decisions to focus on the business where you need to get it to, but B, we share this. You need to keep that focus on the home front as well, right? Because all the success in the world doesn't mean anything if you lose everything getting there.
100.
So the next place I wanted to go with this one came out of, I went to the State of Tech event that you spoke at recently.
Okay.
And you said something, you didn't dive into it. I don't know if they didn't want to touch upon it too much on the stage or what the deal was with it, but
happens a lot to me.
I was like, that's it. I want to know more about that because I feel like I'm probably going to share your feelings about this very much, but I want to dive deep into it more and understand your feelings about this. You made a comment about how corporate America is set up in a very fear-based way when it comes to people striking out and doing their own thing. And I don't want to take you out of context here, so clarify all you want. But I would love to know more about your feelings about how corporations are set up to not allow their employees to strike out and do their own thing and advance in that way.
Yeah, and I won't even blame it entirely on corporate America. Maybe it's even just our society.
Sure.
So if you have a job, let's take someone that's making $100,000 a year.
Yep.
You're making $100,000 a year, 6 figures. It probably took you a couple of years to get there. Mm-hmm. You might have some loans, some student loans.
Yeah.
You might have some car payments, some house payments.
Yep.
You probably have a cabin if you live in Minnesota.
Yep.
So just right out of the gate, your burn rate is really close.
Yeah.
To your monthly revenue.
Yes.
Monthly household revenue. And not much room for error. And then on top of that, you're potentially saving, in your 401k.
Yep.
And the worst part of all is that the ever increasing healthcare prices are eroding your purchasing power.
Yep.
Every year, you're basically seeing less of an increase because it's mostly going to pay for your health insurance premium.
Yep.
But what makes it absolutely worse is corporate America is set up in a way that you're afraid of losing your job.
Yes.
Like you're afraid. You no one ever walks by and says, you know what? Your job is secure.
Right.
You know what? you got at least 5 years.
Yeah.
With this type of increase. No one
Right.
walks by and says that.
Right.
You never get that.
Right.
You might get your annual review and you get your meager increase,
Yeah.
but there's no assurances given.
No.
At all. And it's confounded. It's exacerbated by the fact that you're seeing layoffs here, layoffs there. If you work for a publicly traded company,
Yep.
anything could happen at any moment.
Yes.
Completely unrelated to today's performance.
Yep.
That company's performance.
Yep.
That could result in you losing your job.
Yep.
So it's set up to not reassure you. And what humans desire more than anything is stability and reassurance. But your jobs no longer give that to you. But they give you just enough
Yep.
where you have to stay.
Yep. Absolutely. No, it's crazy to me. And I think one of the big kicks that I've been on for the last probably 6 months now has been pushing people to develop their personal brand. Mm-hmm. I think that is the most valuable asset that any person will ever own, is establishing why somebody would want to work with you, establishing that you are an expert in your industry, being known as a thought leader in a space when you're establishing your personal brand is an incredible thing. That's where you, as a person, if you're working for a corporation or a large company and the rug is pulled out from under you, they're acquired or whatever happens to your job, that's where you can put yourself in a position where you can move forward very quickly. But I think that what's even more important than trying to move forward quickly and landing another job is just knowing in your core, I'm valuable. I bring skills to the table. Mm-hmm. I have options. I don't have to be an employee. I can own my own thing.
Exactly.
And until you really establish your personal brand and the narrative of what your life is going to be and what you believe in and what you want to do and what change you want to make in this world, until you've identified those things and you're pushing those messages, it's going to be really hard to be that person because nobody's going to see you as being viable in that space.
Nope.
So that's been a kick that I've been on for a while. So I totally agree with you. And I felt the same way about the school system. For me, the school system, I was set up to fail in the school system. I didn't learn the way the school system taught to me. I'm amazed that you were successful in business school when you were not taking the average road in business school at all. You were working on a business while you were in business school. That's a very small percentage of people doing that.
Yes.
More of them should be, but it's a very small percentage of them that are. So, I mean, that's absolutely incredible.
Business school is part of the feeder.
Yeah.
I mean, it's set up for people who want to have a job.
Yes.
And want to have a higher paying job.
Yes. And
have a little bit more security. That's what it's really about.
Yeah.
Getting more security.
Yeah. No, I love that. Okay. We are coming up on 17 minutes here. And as I told you, I'm trying to keep these as close to 20 minutes as possible.
Okay.
Here's the one reason I wanted to have you on here above anyone else in this space. You are somebody that I respect tremendously for utilizing existing technologies to take an idea and just start building your idea, building your company, building your vision, building the MVP to test it out and see if people will move forward. This is an incredibly important thing for any founder to be spending their time doing. And so many people do it the wrong way. And there's so many different ways you can do it. Mm-hmm. But I love the way you do this. So can you just dive into, with some of the businesses that you've been a part of and started over the years, what is your process for testing an idea and getting to that first product?
Yeah, and I won't claim to have always known to test things, or at least I wasn't very good at testing things,
Sure.
Testing the market.
Yeah.
I've always been good at, building an MVP.
Yes.
I've never had a problem with that.
Yes.
So those are two different skills, and so when it comes to the MVP building, I'll talk about Relate.
Okay.
So Relate is a technology that I've developed with some co-founders, and it's a chatbot that coaches you to help improve your behavior or make changes. And I'm grossly oversimplifying the product right now, but
that's fine. Yeah.
What I actually tried to start Relate in 2012 before I started RetraceHealth,
okay.
Which is a company most people know me for,
Yep.
in addition to Nice.Healthcare.
Yep.
And I tried Relate first, but I couldn't do it because although the math and the science were based on what I studied in graduate school and school statistics, the technology in 2012 wasn't at the place where I could build an MVP myself.
Sure.
Like I tried and I couldn't. It would have cost way more than I was willing to spend,
Yep.
To do it. So fast forward to 2017, now there's a myriad of products that allowed me to build the first version of this product without any help, just myself.
Yep.
And the users didn't know. The users thought they were talking to a machine,
right?
That was getting to know them over time.
Yep.
And so so one thing that's interesting about that case study is just sometimes it's not possible.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just have to move on to something else,
Yep.
which I did,
Yep.
and it was RetraceHealth that I moved on to.
Yep.
Now with RetraceHealth, everything that needed to happen was definitely possible.
Okay.
And we didn't have funds, to hire a bunch of developers and build out this technology.
Yep.
And the market hadn't even been proven yet.
Okay.
Because these are still very early days in 2012, 2013
Yep.
to talk about selling direct primary care that's technology, powered directly to consumers and employers. It wasn't happening very much. Okay. So what me and the early employees did is we looked for best-in-class software that to do the discrete functions. We mapped out the entire process, and we looked for the best-in-class, and then we filtered by the ones that either had open APIs or there was some other way to connect it to something else. And so sometimes the best-in-class was just out of the question because it was a closed system.
Sure.
So we jettisoned those right away because we had to prioritize, open data. So once we had the set of technologies, we just stitched it together. And then, you had to do things like, change the CSS in every single one to make sure the colors and the fonts and everything looked the same. Some users could see, wow, this URL is getting really long. And then, oh, now it's really short again. Oh, and now it's back over here.
What are these guys doing?
What are they doing? It was legit. We were protecting some things we couldn't do exactly the way we wanted to.
Sure.
Because we had to encrypt data and protect it because it was PHI. PHI, private, personal health information.
Yep.
So, but the key was just doing the research, like just spending time online and then testing and trying to stitch these things together. And that allowed us to scale the company to a pretty big size before we started developing any, internal technology.
Couple of really good things there, Thompson. So, I mean, number one, at this point in time, most of the technologies exist for most people's ideas to get to an MVP.
Absolutely.
I totally appreciate that maybe 5-10 years ago, it wasn't there yet. But today, I can't see any excuses. It's too easy to leverage existing technologies and just stand something up. So reinforcing what you're saying, absolutely do that. I did the same thing with my current product. My first version of my product was built on a WordPress template that I made for myself. All right. It was a workable product that I could send out to people. I couldn't release it at an enterprise level, but I could at least test it for myself, and a couple close friends could use it to see if this is worth investigating and investing in more.
Yes.
So no excuses. If you have an idea, find the technologies. Just sit down and if you don't understand technology enough to know which technologies you could leverage to get there, sit down with someone that does. Just have them help you create that roadmap of maybe some Google Sheets here, maybe Slack integration here, whatever it might be, would get you to an MVP that people can test. And once people test it, then they will be able to tell you either yes, you should move forward, or no, you shouldn't, because one of the most valuable pieces of advice I ever heard was from Mitch Kupit, who was my second guest. He's been a pseudo advisor to me for the last 9.5 months, almost a year now. And one of the things he said to me was, I was really excited. I had a meeting with a huge corporation that wanted to test out my product. And I came to him just on cloud 9. And he said, all right, I want you to be excited. You're allowed to be excited. But you always need to keep in mind that there's the idea of what you're going to build in your customer's head, and there's what it actually is when they use it. So the faster you can get to a product that they can use and actually give you feedback, the better you're going to be. But the other thing that I wanted to say, though, that just blows my mind with you is, we say this is easy to put together all this information, but you are working in very heavily regulated industries where you do have to be worried about HIPAA compliance, PHI, PII, right? Confidential patient information. That is a huge step to be venturing out into the startup world with those kinds of barriers in front of you. So I don't know if you want to comment on that at all, but I commend you for doing that, for just saying, you know what, this is what I'm going to do. I realize there's barriers. You had to establish that domain knowledge before you could do this, clearly, but you did it, right? Maybe just talk briefly about what is it like venturing into a startup scene in something that is so heavily regulated.
I would say it's frustrating, because there's just some things that you want to do, and for no good reason besides some legislation or some regulation or some, piece of paper somewhere, you can't do it.
Right.
And many of the times these things are outdated.
Right.
They're just there. But what makes it even more frustrating is that the industry incumbents love this stuff.
Right.
They love all these restrictions and regulations and barriers because it just deeper entrenches, their roots in the system. So that really is just infuriating to me. So me and my team, we're passionate about circumventing things. And one of the things that's interesting about healthcare is a lot of people think things are laws. But they're not. They're actually health insurance rules to get paid by them. Really? But they've been around for so long, and everybody's just kind of capitulated that people say, no, the law. That's the law. Like that's the law. They're like, whoa, like where? Like show me that. Like, let's pull up the statutes here in Minnesota. I've been there many times myself. Like show me where it says that. It doesn't say that. Like, oh, I found it. You have to do this and this 10,000 things to get reimbursed. From this insurance company. But you got to do it a different way for this one. In a way, it creates barriers to entry. For startups. But it also creates barriers to entry, for startups to compete against the incumbents. So it is frustrating. But so here's an example of one that's real quick. We're working on integrating our own app with different internal processes. And, right now we use QuickBooks for our accounting. It works. And it would just be, so QuickBooks has an open API. We have our database. Our EMR has an open database. The three could just talk to each other and beautiful things would happen. But QuickBooks is not HIPAA compliant.
Sure. So now you can't.
So now we can't. And
end of story.
End of story. I mean, I was so excited by this process that was going to go away, and it just simply cannot happen.
Yeah.
And it's no. I mean, QuickBooks obviously encrypts their data.
Sure.
And if someone steals it, it's safe.
Yeah.
But the fact remains that they don't want us get into that space.
Yeah.
So we can't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure QuickBooks is a very safe place, and if they're not, I'm going to be stopping using QuickBooks immediately. But yeah, I know it's crazy, right? Okay, the last thing, and I did it. I went over time, and I always do this, but that's fine because I wanted to touch upon one last piece that I found very interesting. Again, it was at the State of Tech event. Okay. Kyle Rolfing was on stage with you, who's a very generous person with his time, very smart person, tons of domain knowledge in the space of healthcare. One of the co-founders of Bright Health, if people listening aren't sure. But one of the things that I'm very passionate about, specifically in Minnesota in the startup scene, is the availability of other founders to talk to other founders to help through issues. And one of the things that, and surrounding yourself with these advisors is tremendously valuable and incredibly important for any startup entrepreneur. But Kyle let everybody know that there's a think tank, there's a group of you that all get together on a semi-regular basis. I think he said it was maybe 10 different individuals that get together.
Oh, it's probably almost like 30.
30 people now, all in the healthcare space.
Yeah, all founders of their own companies.
Talk about this a little bit, because I can only imagine, like, this must be incredible to have access to these kinds of people on a regular basis.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very open, generous, authentic group. And I think it helps a lot of us avoid a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
It helps us save time.
Yep.
And it also keeps people in the know.
Yeah.
And we're able to commiserate and celebrate with one another. Yeah. And we're all in healthcare, so we have this industry thing in common.
Yes.
And sure, some people are kind of in the pharmaceutical side, some people in the services side, some people are on the reimbursement side, but it's all healthcare.
Yeah.
So we can complain to each other, right? About how terrible healthcare is, right. Or how good it is, because there's so much opportunity. And I think the thing about healthcare too is there's very few direct-to-consumer businesses in healthcare. Yeah. So our business models usually are pretty close to each other. Okay. It's not like one person is, doing Facebook advertising and one person's, selling to enterprises with ACVs of $500,000, right? Right. We're all kind of lumping on the same side. So it's great to be able to have that much experience and knowledge. Many of them are multiple time founders. Yep. Some are venture backed, some are not. Yep. It's a very diverse group, in terms of, the experience level. A
lot, I'm sure, they're all in the same healthcare space, but I'm sure there's a lot of transferable knowledge, even if it's not, the same kind of customer acquisition you're looking for. Maybe they're more in the financial space, but there's still got to be a lot of transferable knowledge. Having that group of advisors for any founder is a tremendous thing to have. And I was shocked to hear Kyle say that you guys are all coming together and doing this, because it's an amazing thing. But number two, a lot of you guys are sort of competitors in a way, but that's great that you're all willing to help each other out just for the betterment of healthcare. Because if there's one thing that needs to be improved, it's healthcare. Yeah. Right?
And the market is big enough for
absolutely
a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. All right, Thompson, this has been an honor. Thank you so much for being on the vlog with me here.
Yeah, no problem.
I hope everybody listening found value in this. I'm sure that they did. If you're unfamiliar with Nice.Healthcare, definitely check out Thompson's company, Nice.Healthcare. It's just nice.healthcare. Yeah. And you can find out some more information about it there. They have some videos online that you can look at there as well. And if you haven't shaken his hand or met Thompson, next time he's speaking at an event, make sure to just pin him in the corner and force him to have a real quick conversation, because every time I get a couple minutes with Thompson, I feel like I just gained another month in valuable information to help me move forward. So this is a good guy to have in your court over here. So thank you very much, Thompson.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.